Today on the official Marvel podcast, we're exploring the creation of Marvel Animation's What If with star Jeffrey Wright and executive producer and supervising director Brian Andrews.
Plus, we continue to journey deeper into the multiverse with the upcoming TVA comic book series with the writer and Loki Season 2 scribe, Katharyn Blair.
I'm taking all of my Loki Season 2 experience and pouring it into this new comic iteration of the TVA.
And finally, we're getting ready to smash with the all-new red Hulk hands as we chat with Director of Product Design, Jesse Falcon.
When you're looking down at your hands and they're big and green and they're like the size of the Hulks, it does something to the reptilian part of the brain.
I'm Evan Narcissus.
And I'm Anthony Carboni.
And this is the official Marvel podcast. The first season of Marvel Animation's What If introduced viewers to The Watcher, as well as alternate versions of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, proving how one small change could result in an entirely new universe. Star Jeffrey Wright and director Brian Andrews both appeared on a 2021 episode of Marvel Studios Assembled, so we thought it'd be a fun throwback to revisit what they had to say.
Jeffrey spoke about his thoughts on the Watcher's role as the show's narrator.
The Watcher kind of serves as a Rod Serling to the Twilight Zone, kind of narrating the events, but also a sometimes passive, sometimes not participant. The Watcher is a celestial, extraterrestrial being. I think he was introduced, if I'm not mistaken, in a Fantastic Four comic in 1963, where we discover him on the moon, and he's introduced on the cover as the most dramatic being.
When Brian Andrews was working on season 1 of the series, he envisioned the Watcher a little differently than the character you might remember from the comics.
And in the comics, he got downright goofy at times and involved all the time. We're going to acknowledge those things, but slowly over time. Maybe not the goofiness, but we want to play with the conceit that the being is mysterious for the first initial episodes, and we start seeing more and more of him as the episodes play out. So by the end, he's actually full-figured. We really see him. We really know, like, oh, here's this alien being, and he might actually get involved for him, what might be the first time.
Jeffrey described using the power of his voice, that awesome voice,
so good,
to get into character.
The language is very cool, and it kind of, it speaks to a certain tone. He's obviously got to have a kind of strength and a kind of, gravitas and power and all that stuff. I like the idea of doing animation, of using the voice really as, from my perspective, as, the whole character. I'd really just pretty much do what I do with any script, though, and anything, is just try to find the music that's on the page and figure out if I can play it,
He also spoke about finding his own rhythm and tone for the role.
It was a really organic and kind of, methodical process of talking it through at first and trying to give some ideas about, how I'd like a character like this to sound. I think often when you have a character like this in kind of the history of, shows and movies, we make these certain assumptions about what that character should sound like, Very often it's some, old, when we think of power and wisdom and all of this, we think, we go to the UK for some reason. We think of Brits. It's like, I don't know if the British necessarily have, the monopoly on all those things. So how can we find some other tones and rhythms and things that bring all of that, that power to the character, but are grounded in maybe some different rhythms and some different notes? And that was a fun conversation to have.
What If isn't just a well-acted show. Visually, it's stunning. Director Brian Andrews described the work that went into the animation.
We definitely wanted to stand out, and there is a variety of animated product being made these days, and a lot of it tends to be CG, and sometimes even, I guess they call it 2.5D or 2D, 3D, where it's like it's 3D, but it's made to look 2D. So you might have your traditional backgrounds painted, and the characters look as if they're cel painted on but they're not. We're exploring a variety of techniques, and whatever is going to help us achieve the look we're going for, we'll use. But we want to kind of hide it a bit and make sure that it doesn't jump out. And in our opinion, it felt like a lot of the things that we were seeing, that stuff just jumps out, and sometimes the 3D maybe isn't working. There's aspects that were pros and cons, so it seemed like the best way to achieve what we wanted to achieve was just to be buckled down, have some really hard discipline, and just make something rad 2D, so that we would have the artistic freedom to have it look as rich as we wanted.
And Jeffrey shared his own excitement about the visuals coming together.
It's pretty exciting when you see it all come together, and the laying on works and everything layers together well. And this is like a really beautiful kind of like richly cinematic quality to the animation, and there are some wonderful sound effects that are used too at times with the voice, and to see it all come together and this kind of diverse perspectives, diverse range of heroism and villainy. I think it's going to be pretty exciting stuff.
Brian expanded on what Jeffrey described as a cinematic quality to the show.
Cinematic storytelling is becoming a thing where you don't have to just go to a movie to see cinematic storytelling. We're actually seeing it on the streaming screen or the small screen. And there's so many shows out now that are just borrowing the cinematic language and just going there. So they are, even though they're quote unquote episodes of a show, they feel like, in a way, many movies when they do it right.
And what does Jeffrey think is the best part of being part of the Marvel family? The fans, of course.
I love how richly invested fans are in these stories and the characters and the films. One of the things about Marvel fans, I think, is that they have Marvel universes in their heads as well. They have what exists on film, what exists in the comics, but then in their heads they have these other, imaginings and stories that they tell too. And I think that's all a part of the storytelling universe. And so the opportunity for us to begin to explore these alternate realities in ways that might touch on some ideas that fans have had or don't, or, surpass, those expectations is going to be really cool. And it also opens the door and a series of doors to other endless possibilities.
If you'd like to hear more from Jeffrey Wright, Brian Andrews, and the rest of the creative team behind What If, watch Marvel Studios Assembled: The Making of What If, streaming now on Disney+. What If Seasons 1 and 2 are also now streaming on Disney+, and Season 3 premieres on December 22nd with a new episode debuting daily for 8 days. Now, while we wait for the Watcher's next multiversal adventure, we have another multiversal story to look forward to in a new comic book series.
TVA is a 5-issue comic book miniseries set to debut next week on December 18th. It follows some of our favorite TVA characters like Mobius, B-15, OB, and of course, Miss Minutes, as they work to solve a mystery troubling multiple timelines.
Written by Katharyn Blair, whose writing credits include Marvel Television's Loki Season 2, this miniseries also follows some familiar Marvel heroes like Ghost Spider and Captain Peggy Carter as they embark on a timeline-hopping adventure. Our friend and fellow official Marvel podcast host Victoria Ying recently sat down with Katie to learn all about it. Let's listen.
Hey, Katie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Victoria?
I'm great, and I'm so excited to talk to you about this new TVA comic series.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah. And before we get into it, can you tell us a little bit about your Marvel career?
I was just a little baby screenwriter watching Loki Season 1, and I have been a Marvel fan for, since the beginning. I grew up watching the VHS tapes of the original 90s X-Men, so that started early. But the MCU I've been a fan of since Iron Man. I was in college when it came out, and I've just been a complete loyal fan since then. The night before, in line, super tired but really excited to be there kind of fan. So I was very excited for Loki, and super pregnant with my 4th kid and watching it. And my friend had told me that one of our acquaintances from grad school, he was a year above me, Michael Waldron was the creator. I had never actually, we weren't like buddies, but we were friendly with each other. And so I just, I saw Season 2 was coming in, and I was like, you know what does it hurt to try, right? So I just reached out and I was like, hey, this is just kind of a long shot, but I have some books under my belt and I'd love to jump into the MCU. And turns out he was like looking for somebody, and they referred me to Eric Martin, who was the head writer. And then I came on to Loki for my very first staff writing job, and it was amazing. And every time they had to tell everybody to make sure to keep a lid on the excitement, they were always looking at me, like in the room. They'd be like, hey, we're going to be talking about X, Y, and Z today. And everyone just remember to take deep breaths. And everyone would look at me and I'd be like, why are you guys looking at me? Because I was the little fangirl that had to go to the bathroom and like hyperventilate. And then 6 months later, they called me like, hey, we need somebody on set. So will you come write on set for us? So I got to go move my whole family, all 4 of my kids, my husband, go hang out in London for a summer, 6 months, and be on set every day. It was a dream.
That's amazing. So how do you think your previous work as a writer on Loki season 2, how did that help you write the comics?
Well, I was thinking about this actually, and it was like I was literally in the TVA because a lot of the sets were practical. So I was sitting right outside the war room on those little couches doing work in between takes and stuff. So it felt like I knew that place like the back of my hand. I know these characters, Mobius, OB, B-15. They're characters that I've spent a lot of time with and that I love dearly. So it just felt like it was a very visceral experience for me to actually be there on the ground, seeing it kind of end one chapter and start another. So it was really helpful to feel like I was just kind of returning to a place that I loved, not having to construct something from the ground up that was new. It was pretty cool.
So how did this TVA comic series come about?
Well, I got an email from an exec at Marvel, and he said that a TVA comic was something that they were really all excited about. He asked me, hey, you wouldn't be interested in comics, would you? I had to, again, go take a deep breath and construct an email that didn't have too many exclamation points. So of course, I'm super interested, like trying to be professional when I'm hyperventilating. So yeah, and then they hooked me up with Jordan White, my awesome editor. And they were so cool in going like, let's hear what your vision is. Let's hear what you want to do. And it has always been kind of exciting and scary when sky's the limit when you're writing, especially I've never had that with anything Marvel related because there's always parameters, And so it's just kind of like, hey, what would you do to the TVA if you could? And I had to go sit for a minute and really think about it because it felt like a lot of power. So I came up with an idea that I've been noodling even since the days of wandering those TVA halls and trying not to slip on that really pretty black floor. Of like, hey, you know what? I wonder what else is down here. So I kind of pitched that idea and they were just like, that's cool. Let's do that. So just ran with it.
That's awesome. So TVA is really special because it connects directly to the MCU. Can you share how?
Yes. Well, it connects to the MCU because the TVA has its origins in the comics. Obviously, it's in Thor, it's in Fantastic Four, but it really became kind of a thing in the MCU when we fleshed it out. I mean, Kazra, our set designer, Michael Waldron, our creator, and Kevin Wright, our executive producer, really kind of filled in those gaps and made it just a really beautiful place that I know I was excited to tune into every week. So it feels like that is a place where it kind of fleshed itself out. So we're taking that TVA and putting it kind of back in its comic space where it was born, which is really cool. So that's where it connects, but it's definitely a comic-centric TVA right now in this iterations. Like this is my comic interpretation of what is happening after Loki has made his sacrifice. So I do have a lot of like knowledge about this place, and I'm taking all of my Loki season 2 experience and pouring it into this new comic iteration of the TVA. So it's a bit of a kind of a funny in-between awesome space.
So what characters can we expect to return from your comic series?
So issue 1, we're going to see Mobius return, OB, B-15, who is Verity Willis. Obviously Miss Minutes. We got to get Miss Minutes in there. And we have Casey, who is another analyst. And I mean, we're adding some new people, which is really fun. And we also have a couple people in the TVA that are completely new, which is really cool.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, who are these characters and where exactly in their lives do we find them?
They are characters that either don't have a timeline to return to, which we saw in the end of season 2. There was an instance where a lot of these timelines got pruned, right? Blown up, actually. So they don't have a place to go. So the question is whether or not they want to be rehomed, go somewhere else, find a completely different timeline, find a different, reality for all we know with the MCU. But they have chosen instead to stay here and try and protect what's left, and putting it all in this little brigade of people who are just trying to keep freedom alive, which is really cool. So we have Gambit, and this is a version of Gambit that didn't manage to save Rogue, so he's dealing with his own wounds. And then we have Spider-Gwen, Gwen Stacy, who is unable to return to her timeline. Her timeline is still there, but it's unable to accommodate her anymore, which is something that is explored in her most recent run. We also have Jimmy Hudson from the Ultimate Universe, who is Wolverine's son. So that's kind of a fun thing to play with in the TVA, new faces. And then we have Captain Carter, who kind of comes and goes. She's one of the leaders of the team, so she's very boots on the ground in various timelines to make sure that things are protected. And we have B-15, who we saw in Deadpool and Wolverine, kind of in her new suit, rocking it, has her own office now. So she's helping lead them all. So this team is just trying to honor Loki's sacrifice and trying to find a purpose in their own lives. Because like, how do you find a purpose when you have no home? So trying to make a home out of a wreckage, out of ashes, out of nothing is kind of a beautiful thing. It's always been a beautiful thing. I've always been like a found family kind of person.
We all recognize Miss Minutes from Loki, but who are the other clocks hanging out on the cover of TVA #1?
Well, Miss Minutes, as we know, is a very mercurial little clock. So she's the boss of the show. We all know this. She's got sass, she's got attitude. But after she, went homicidal, I feel like it's probably fair to maybe put in some checks and balances. So Doc Clock is another iteration of AI that is there to help with any sort of medical or scientifically leaning things. So she works in the med bay. It's just to keep the team healthy, to keep everyone in the TVA safe. And Sir Seconds is somebody who helps manage all the IT. So he helps with CCTV footage, every bit of monitoring that happens, because we didn't know that they were going to go bomb all the timelines. And that probably is something that we should be a little more cognizant of. So he kind of keeps an eye on things. He's head of security, sort of a vibe. And they're all related. So it's her older sister and her brother.
I love that you mentioned found family, but then also here's Miss Minutes' family too.
Yeah, she found out she has family and she's not super stoked.
I just think it's so cool that you've been able to work both in prose, screenwriting, like you got to see your stuff filmed, and now you're in comics. Like, wow, you really got to touch all these different mediums, and so many of them are with Marvel, which is such a blessing for both Marvel and hopefully for you.
Thank you. I'm just excited they let me in. I'm like, you guys, they haven't realized I'm here yet. Like, I keep waiting for somebody to show up and go, ma'am, you can't play. Who thinks you can write Spider-Gwen? Not us. So I'm so honored that they're giving me the shot. It's really cool.
I'm so excited to read this series. And thank you so much, Katie, for joining us and telling us all about the TVA.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Anthony, talk to me. You remember those big old foam Hulk hands from the early 2000s, right?
I remember them vividly and so positively, Evan. I loved Hulk hands so much. I put the Hulk hands on and immediately just started screaming. Screaming to the point where veins were popping out of my neck and my head. It really is. It feels powerful. Do you not have a similar experience with Hulk hands? Have you not tried them on?
I never got a chance to try them on, but I used to think that, wow, wouldn't it be funny to try and do everyday tasks with the Hulk hands, right? Like washing plates, cooking dinner. Did you do any of that?
You can't do much that requires dexterity with the Hulk hands. Let's be honest. Hulk, not known for dexterity. That's not his number one thing. But
yeah, that's why his battle cry is like Hulk smash. It's not like Hulk do needlepoint.
That's right. Hulk organize these small objects into different containers. No. You put on those hands and you immediately start screaming and running around. I can't explain what they do to you. You truly feel
like you've been irradiated by gamma rays? Like, is that what you're talking about?
It's exactly. All the frontal lobe goes to sleep and you are the Hulk. Listen, don't worry, because it's not just about the original green Hulk hands anymore. You have a new choice, Evan. You can put on red Hulk hands.
Wow. Step into legendary Hulk power there.
Listen, I got to talk to Director of Product Design Jesse Falcon, not just about the new red Hulk hands, but also about creating the original green Hulk hands for Toy Biz, which was a former division of Marvel, including getting into character himself. I'm very excited because we are going to talk about what I think is a very important object in the history of Marvel. It was so important to me, and I know it was important to many others. Today we're going to talk about the Hulk hands. And I've got with me Jesse Falcon. For those who don't know Jesse, can you tell us what your background is and what you do at Marvel, Toy Biz / Disney?
Sure. Yeah, hi, I'm Jesse Falcon. I've been a toy designer for Marvel / Disney / Toy Biz for 30 years. I kind of started doing this when I was a kid, not knowing that this was actually a profession, and I started just making my own toys, and I did that for far too long. Did not know you could go to school, like at lovely places like CalArts or NYU, to actually design toys. I found that out when I fell into a job in the toy industry and met a bunch of really amazing people that did do that. But I got hired by Toy Biz. I interned at Marvel in 91, and I got hired by Toy Biz in 94, and I've literally been there ever since. And it's literally Christmas every day for Santa's little elves. Even today, I got a package of stuff, prototype thingies from this company that I work with. And I'm like, ooh, joy. Open this package and see what's in there. So if you're thinking about getting a job in the toy industry, do. It's great. It's a lot of fun.
Amazing. And for those who may not be aware, can you describe Hulk hands and what Hulk hands are?
We were working on the very first live action theatrical Hulk movie, but they hired, I'm forgetting the guy's name, Steve. He created Slimer from the Ghostbusters, and he designed this 24-foot tall animatronic Hulk that was all foam. Like it was kind of, imagine like what the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles looked like. Like those were all actors in suits. Yeah. But imagine that like being a giant 24-foot tall puppet with a fully animatronic skeleton. It looked kind of like a giant Terminator, and then a foam latex exterior. So in the close-up shots, you could maybe even have an actor's face. The mid shots, you'd use this thing, and then from the really wide shots, you'd use CGI. That was kind of like maybe a seed in all of our collective thinking of like how do you bring the Hulk to life for a kid at home?
And so what you basically came up with were these giant green foam fists that kids could wear. And you had already done the Spider-Man web shooters, right?
Yeah. The Marvel brand at that point and Toy Biz at that point were like on a roll. And that Spider-Man web shooter was such a runaway hit. And really, if you're a kid and you want to be Spider-Man and you slap those things on and you go and the silly string comes out for about 21 seconds, you're Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But that has been the age-old issue with the web shooter, so that we would always have like a reservoir or container in there so you could fill it up with water so you could constantly reshoot it. But for the Hulk hands, we were like, how do we bring this experience to life? And Damon Nee, who I worked with at the time, and Alan Fine, who was Toy Biz's CEO, had kind of together said Hulk hands in a meeting, and we were all off to the races.
Yeah, I imagine that must have taken a bit because like Spider-Man, you can give web shooters. Thor, you give a hammer, right? Sure. All of these things make a lot of sense. These are all things where it's like, I understand what we add to the kid to make the kid feel like the character. So it must have been kind of tough to sort of sit around and figure out do we sell kids purple shorts? Like, what do we do?
Yeah. Well, listen, there were a lot of different ideas. We had an idea where you had an inflatable pump that kids could like pump their like muscles up and it would rip out of a shirt. But this is what happens, when you're developing in toys. You constantly throwing a lot of different ideas up against the wall.
So the Hulk hands came out of all this ideation of like, we need to figure out, what makes the Hulk. But also it came from, like you're saying, it came from this web shooter and this idea of being the hero. Why is that such an important kind of category of toy, right? Because I think when people first think about Toy Biz, particularly around that time, you think about the figures, right? Like we were all buying Toy Biz figures, but the Hulk hands and the web shooters are a completely different category. And why does this category work so well?
I think what was important for us from a Marvel perspective is the storytelling. Like, how do you bring that story to the hands of a child? But when you put these Hulk hands on and you just reach inside and there was like a little plastic like grip that you could hold on to, and you'd smash them together, and there's a trigger switch inside, and they would scream, and then they would yell Hulk smash. When you're looking down at your hands and they're big and green and they're like the size like of the Hulks, it does something to the reptilian part of the brain. The very oldest part of, the stem of the brain. And I think there's just, I don't know if it's a dopamine release or what, but like there's a burst of excitement. And I think that there is an incorrect feeling that you are the Hulk.
Now, the sounds that are on the Hulk hands, you are the voice of quite a few toys that I had growing up. You were kind of like the go-to guy if you couldn't get like the movie voice, right?
Sure.
For a lot of Marvel toys.
I'm the Mel Blanc of the toy VO industry for Marvel. Mel Blanc was the guy who did all the voices for Warner Brothers cartoons.
Yeah. You have been, for various toys, you have been the Thing.
Yes.
You have been Spider-Man.
Many, many times.
Many, many times. But the most important thing for what we're talking about now is you are the voice of Hulk hands.
Yes.
I was wondering if we could get a Hulk or a Smash or a combination of the two from you.
I would love to. Are your mics ready for it?
I feel like they are.
Okay. Hulk Smash!
That's it! That's amazing. Now, we have a new Hulk coming up in Marvel Studios' Captain America Brave New World. We've got a Red Hulk. Are we going to see Red Hulk hands? What are we going to see?
You betcha we're going to see some Red Hulk hands.
And of course, there are more Marvel Legends action figures coming too.
We're making it, and we're not even going to pretend to make it a Build-A-Figure because he's so big in the movie. He's bigger than the Green Hulk that we were like, let's just make it its own deluxe size figure. Also, like Sam Cap with the wings and the shield and the all that stuff needs to be deluxe size. So we're making 3 big deluxe size Marvel Legends for that film as well.
That's going to be awesome. Is there any difference between the red and green Hulk hands other than obviously the color, right?
It's just the color for now, and I can't wait to see the film.
Final question. This one's very important. Mint in box or take it out and play?
Always take it out and play.
All right.
But if I have my druthers, I get 2 of them, for both.
Right on. Jesse Falcon, thank you so much.
Anthony, what a treat.
As we heard earlier from writer Katharyn Blair, Marvel Television's Loki was a really unique story to tell. The show has seamlessly weaved complicated ideas about the passage of time with life's more simple questions like, what is our purpose? In Season 1, Episode 2 of Loki, the Asgardian god of mischief finds out that another version of himself is killing agents of the Time Variance Authority, aka the TVA. Loki gets recruited by Agent Mobius to track down the variant and learn more about their plan. He discovers that the variant has been ambushing TVA soldiers and hiding out in doomsdays to cover their tracks. While taking a break between researching apocalypses, Loki questions Mobius' belief about where he comes from, to which Mobius replies,
if you think too hard about where any of us came from, who we truly are, it sounds kind of ridiculous. Existence is chaos. Nothing makes any sense, so we try to make some sense of it. And I'm just lucky that the chaos I emerged into gave me all this, my own glorious purpose.
All episodes of Loki are now streaming only on Disney+.
Next time on the official Marvel podcast, Marvel VP and executive editor Tom Brevoort joins us for a short history lesson about the Thing's appearance on a 1976 Jack Kirby Hanukkah card.
Jack would very often draw the Thing when it came time to do some sort of self-caricature.
Until then, make sure to subscribe and tell a friend about the show.
Or leave a review. It helps others discover the pod.
This episode was hosted by Anthony Carboni and myself, Evan Narcis, with Victoria Ying.
Our producers are Jasmine Estrada and Anita Flores.
With help from Senior Manager of Audio Production and Development, Brad Barton, and Production Manager, Emily Godfrey.
Mixed by Zachary Goldberg.
Theme music by Ida Akbal.
Executive producers are Larissa Rosen and Jesse Berger.
Thanks for listening, and see you next week.
Smash!